All right. Hello, everyone.
We are
How are you,
live.
Scott?
Hi.
Yay. Yes, yes,
Hello.
yes. Sorry, I was fiddling around with things again, so I didn't get to put our other little opening on there. But
Always
you guys know
fiddling
us.
around.
I know. I'm already sweating. We're going to dinner and a play after this, so I put on my makeup and I can't wait to get out of a t-shirt. Even this feels too hot right now. How's your Saturday,
No more.
Scott?
It's great. It's been incredibly productive. I'm going out of town for a few days tomorrow night, late on a red
Yeah.
eye, which I swore I would never take another red eye, but I'm going to. It's just unavoidable. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah. But today was
Good.
like prep and cleaning up for we're coming back to a clean
Yeah.
environment.
That's always nice, for
Yeah.
sure. Good, 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 good. Well, everyone, we have a really awesome show for you guys today. Two things here at the top. One, we'll probably take a break from live streams in September since we will be in the UK and doing our live show there. We are going to try and pop on live as much as we can. Possibly YouTube, possibly Instagram. We'll see. And so we'll see if we resume in October, because we also have another thing we're traveling for then, but it's not quite as much. Second, I'm on call today so if something bad happens and I have to answer my phone, I'm not trying to be rude to anyone, including our guest.
Anything can happen as
who's
we know.
who's in good hands with Dr. Scott should I have to leave. But we'll see. I think I've only had to leave once during a recording that you and I were doing. But you never know, especially when it's hot outside. The city tends to go to shit. Hey, Abby, Alex, Susan, Catherine. Welcome, you guys. Thanks for being here a little bit early. Gosh, I guess jump into new Patreon members.
Absolutely. We have, again, more Patreon members. It's so exciting. Welcome at the associate level, folks. Mike P., Captain of Something, which is its own name. Not Mike P. is Captain of Something, but Captain of Something is their own name. I love it. Catherine H., and then a new doctoral level, Janissa Geek. And so welcome all you guys. And also, we've been seeing something that I really never expected to happen. A number of our already existing members like upping their contribution to us, which is like the most kind and wonderful thing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And it does help us with the travel costs associated with going and doing presentations that we don't get paid for those. So it's great to be able to present live. We love that. But yeah, the having something that will help buffer these travel fees is very helpful. So very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Indeed. Yeah, with everyone that's been bumping up to an intern or doctoral level lately, it's like literally my favorite thing when someone new comes into the Discord channel and we just all start hitting the, little welcome button with the little character that pops up. It's so cute. It's just, little moments like that we need in our day.
And then they have like a year and a half of stuff to go and explore from previous conversations and comments and explorations. Yeah, there's a lot there.
For sure. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring TJ onto the stage and do his introduction. So let me see. Whoop, there we go. So TJ Payne is a year out from becoming Dr. Payne. What a name. I just have to tell you, my dentist when I was a child, his name was Dr. Payne, literally, and spelled like that. And it was terrifying. Nicest man ever, but still, what a profession to pick, right? So the doctor is going to be in the field of psychology, public policy, and law from the California School of Forensic Studies, which is associated with my alma mater, Alliant University. And TJ holds a master's degree in science in forensic behavioral science with a special concentration in criminal behavior. He presented a thesis re-examining 1940s Los Angeles cold cases with modern investigation techniques and knowledge of criminal behavior, which we absolutely need a copy of that stat.
Oh my gosh, so impressive.
Right? So impressive. How fun. Oh my God, why didn't I think of doing something like that? TJ also spent close to a decade working in substance abuse and spent most of his career working in the Skid Row area of Los Angeles, Working in this field provided TJ with extensive knowledge of harm reduction principles and a deep understanding of co-occurring disorders and how they present. He has consulted on cold cases as a forensic behavioral analyst for The Advocate and the Los Angeles Blade magazine. We are going to cover so much more about TJ today. I don't know if we're going to be able to fit everything in, but we're happy to welcome you behind the couch. You're on your own couch right now.
I am. I'm in my wife's best friend's living room couch. So,
that's right. You're traveling.
Yes, I'm in Boston.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you for making the time 3 hours later. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah.
We are so thrilled to have you. We've had some great conversations offline, and I think for Scott and I, it just makes us very excited for the next generation of folks that are coming into these sort of forensic science and forensic psychology adjacent fields. And it's always something that our audience is super interested in, especially those that are sort of exploring coming into the fields themselves. But I know every person that kind of comes into this industry has some sort of true crime origin story that kind of crosses over into them deciding to do the work, or they just found super fascinating at usually a way too early age. I think we can all say that. Why don't we open with what was your kind of earliest intersection with true crime or true crime media?
My grandmother was a big Anne Rule reader when I was a kid. It's kind of, I have such vivid memories of her opening a Ted Bundy book and reading a piece and then closing it and looking at me like,
oh gosh.
Yeah. And that has carried on my whole life. She's 95 now and she will only read killer dealers. She wants them. It's just in my bloodline.
Oh, Grandma.
And now I have those books. I have all of her Anne Rule collection, which is great.
I love that. I mean, even taking a few steps back from it being sort of a mild version sometimes of the salaciousness of the true crime, it's an invitation for anyone who reads these things to think critically, which is really missing from a lot of discourse today. I mean, this is the same thing that happened with Sherlock Holmes in the day, as people started trying to think with inductive and deductive reasoning. And I love this. One of the things that I'll just build on what Dr. Shiloh was saying is your background of education is so fascinating to me, because you're taking advantage of something that is so new, and yet what you've done is constructed like this incredibly well-rounded approach to your education. I mean, after we finished our kind of pre-interview with you, I was telling Shiloh, I was like, that's just amazing that you're getting this much depth in your background. I love it.
Yeah, I feel like, it took me a really long time to sort of kind of circle back to those early true crime forensic roots. And I'm so glad that I have ended up now on this path that feels so correct and wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for that education path that I, really intentionally decided to take.
So can you tell us a little bit more about the journey? I mean, like, you were already, and for anybody that doesn't live in Los Angeles, almost every big city has a skid row. Los Angeles has been increasingly more challenging over the past probably 2 decades. Just the world is a very different place. It's a very challenging, and yet for my colleagues that are down there, a very rewarding experience at times. So you were there previous to restarting your academic journey. Is that correct? And can you tell us about that trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I moved to LA, I honestly, I only knew of like West Hollywood. I was like, nothing else in LA is real. But I learned about
that was mine. Okay, we have that in
common. And at that same time, I was sort of rekindling a relationship with my brother. He had been in and out of jail and on and off of drugs, and my whole family was just sort of hands tied at this point with him. What else we could do? So I actually ended up just volunteering for this it's like a burrito bowl, burrito rolling food truck that would, a bunch of people would get together, roll burritos, and we would walk around Skid Row and hand them out. So that was my first introduction to Skid Row.
Wow.
It was like, I wanted to sort of be, you know, I guess exposed in a way to this sort of, it was almost my way of trying to like understand my brother and what his experience was without, you know, we haven't had those conversations yet, you know. So I started doing that, and then I ended up taking the Glendale Community College has a really great alcohol and drug counseling certificate program, and I had signed up for like a couple classes, very basic one-on-one stuff, and then really fell in love with the faculty and what I was learning, and that totally changed the trajectory of my career path. I finished the program. I ended up getting an internship on Skid Row and then getting a job down there at the Weingart. And I was just fully embedded in that. And yeah, that was pretty much the start of it.
Can you, for those listeners that aren't familiar, can you tell a little bit more about the Weingart? Because it's kind of a staple in downtown LA.
Yeah, totally. It's like, it's such an amazing organization. It's kind of a one-stop shop. It's a huge building. Every floor has a different service available. They have on-site housing, counseling. A lot of folks are coming from, you know, the county jail doing maybe like an alternative sentencing, something like that. And it's really a hub of the community down there.
Yeah, and it's has incredible, like you said, one-stop shopping, which is so needed for people that are trying to work their way out of crisis. So what a great experience. So you spent over a decade as a KDAC, right? Or is that it's a certified alcohol and drug counselor?
Yeah. I ended up working after I left the Weingart. I ended up working at a very different type of facility, residential, private pay in Pasadena. So very fancy. And the reason I ended up taking a job there is because one of my professors in the program was the clinical director. So I really admired her and sort of wanted this sort of mentorship. So I was working there for a couple of years before going to my last job, which was at a methadone treatment, which is another, you know, different modality and experience, outpatient in Boyle Heights. And that's where I was last left.
So were you, how did your academic journey overlap with this? Were you working, or are you still continuing to work in any of those settings while you're finishing up your schoolwork?
Yes. So I ended up going, after I finished the community college program, there was a little bit of a gap, but I ended up going to Antioch to get a bachelor's degree in psychology and addiction. And this was right before the pandemic I started. I think I had maybe 2 terms where I was on site, and then everything switched to being online. Towards the end of that program, I was super burnt out, and I was working full time. I had been promoted to a supervisor position at the clinic. So my responsibilities were shifting, and I really wanted to just be done with school, but I didn't want to stop at the same time, but my burnout level was so high that I was so conflicted on what to do. How do you go to school full time as an adult, you know?
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving my last role so that I could do my master's program full time, which allowed me to get it done in just barely a year, which was fantastic and such a privilege.
That's so much work. And yeah, I mean, Shiloh and I have had these conversations for years about that last kind of overlapping time where we were working other jobs. It's like you have one foot in one world and then another foot in another world. And it's okay for a while as an adult, you know, you're spinning plates, but as you progress more and more towards what your calling is, it gets harder and harder to maintain the balance on that side.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I really felt that shift happening right at the end of that program at Antioch too, where I felt like I had found the program through Alliant and it really resonated with me. And I was like, I would be such a fool not to pursue this right now.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
going back to back is a tough decision to head into another degree program and at a different school.
Yes.
That's, you know, yeah, it could be very challenging.
But congratulations on doing that. And one thing that we may have, I think we touched on it briefly when we were having our offline conversation or our pre-conversation to set up for this meeting today. There are more and more schools across the country that are offering these masters in forensic psychology. And some of them, you know, I've gone and I've done a little investigating, and like some of the curriculum looks pretty challenging and interesting and well-rounded, and others I'm not particularly impressed by. And we've had this interesting experience of people coming to us from a couple of schools going, what do I do with this? Because my counselor didn't give me anything. And we didn't know what to say. But then we also had other people who had really great experiences and were able to integrate it into their existing careers, sort of like what you've done, although I think you've kind of taken it to an exponential level. So in the combination of things that you've done, did you plan this out? Or was this sort of an unfolding, and how did it open up these opportunities for you to lead specifically to forensic behavior analysis and consulting? That's
totally unplanned.
complex. I'm sorry. I'm dumping a lot of questions on you. I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it was completely unplanned. I felt like towards the end of the master's program, I had started looking for jobs, and honestly, I was having a really hard time finding anything. It wasn't a licensure program, and I had applied to a couple of like PsyD programs, and I didn't get admitted. So I just sort of felt like I was really hitting a wall and kind of scared, frankly. And I just kept coming back to the root of what I feel is correct for me, which is to help solve cases, whether that's a cold case, a current case. I feel like I have thought about myself in that role for more than half of my life. And
Wow.
I no longer wanted to ignore that. And I think that in this day and age, and with all of these new, perhaps younger perspectives coming into this field, perhaps there will be more opportunities for civilians to work on these types of cases that aren't necessarily law enforcement, right? I mean, there's tons of organizations that do these types of things. So I just felt like I'm going to try and start somewhere, and working with the Advocate and the Los Angeles Blade was sort of, it really fell into my lap. I had caught wind of the Advocate beginning a series that was based on LGBT cold cases, unsolved cases. And I just reached out to the reporter and kind of sold myself. And we connected really well. We met in Los Angeles, and you know, that's how I started working with them. And it's been really great. And I am now sort of starting to, you guys might have seen it on like my Instagram, promoting myself a little bit more to help other organizations or even individuals. I've had a couple individuals reach out to me about some cases in their families. You know, I know my scope of practice is quite limited, but I feel like if I can help them figure anything out, then that's what I want to be doing. And that's really led me to being I'm now in the FBI application process, which, you know, could take 10 years, who knows, but
it's so fantastic. I love this for you.
Thank you. It made a lot of sense. So
it does make a lot of sense. And I think it's so exciting as you're talking about these jobs that are in law enforcement agencies that could be perfect for civilians. You know, a couple of decades ago, it was really like the crime analyst type positions, right? Because especially right now, there's such a shortage of police officers. And, you know, Scott and I working with a large agency, we know how incredibly challenging recruitment and retention is these days. And there doesn't seem to be a really good answer in sight. Most departments around the country are just kind of throwing money at people, but people of generations coming out of school and coming into careers care about a lot more than money, right? They care about their wellness. They care about their work-life blend and balance. So there's no great answer right now. But if we start pulling cops back from some of these positions that civilians can be working, you're putting more police officers on the streets or in more of the front-facing investigative roles, right? And then you can have with these different trade crafts really at the forefront of the work, maybe behind the scenes. But I really, all this to say, I really think you're on something in the way that policing might be moving, investigations might be moving more towards really appreciating the skills of civilians. And there's always been this sworn sort of versus civilian playing field. There's more and more cracks that I think civilians are going to be able to fill in a really special way that's going to lighten the load for law enforcement. So, yeah, I mean, whatever way, like to me, I'm just loving the way that you're very appropriately kind of wiggling your way into these different areas to say, like, here I am, here's my skill set. It's at a certain point right now. It's going to be more robust later, but here's what I can offer with what I know. And even if it's just like, what a lovely way to do that through consultation in investigative journalism. And who knows, like it's like, I don't know. I'm so excited for just all the opportunities that could be there. During either your master's program or in your doctorate program, have you had opportunities to do practicums or internships and work at different sites? I mean, I don't know if that's part of your coursework.
It's not. And I really wish that it was, because I'm so, I don't want to say desperate, but it kind of is the only word that describes it. I want so much hands-on experience. You know, I feel ready to, you know, be involved and however I can. And neither of these programs require that. So that is definitely one of the major downsides to them. But really, like you said, I truly feel like I am wiggling my way in wherever I can. And there's such a new wave of how investigations can unfold through social media and podcasting. And, you know, book, I look over here because I'm reading this really great investigative book right now that I learned about at a conference. And I'm talking to all those people, trying to, you know, just make my presence known.
Oh, for sure. I've wiggled my way into a lot of situations throughout my years, and however you can do it. I mean, really, it's really about the connections and finding those things to connect with folks over research. And we saw, you know, you're also a student member of ATAP. So, you know, I mean, even becoming a certified threat manager, you know, is something that could definitely be in your wheelhouse too. Just so many opportunities. It makes me so excited for you. But as part of your program right now, of course, you have to do a dissertation. So as we mentioned in your bio, you're about a year out from graduation, which means we have great empathy for where you're at. You're probably very heavy into dissertation, which on one hand, thank goodness you're not doing an internship also, because Scott and I, you know, circled the drain a lot of times doing all of that at once. But your dissertation focuses on the trans panic defense. And this is really interesting timing just in the country, because just recently, as we had talked about, Michigan has officially banned the LGBTQ plus panic defense in a really historic piece of legislation. first, educate our audience a little bit. Can you explain what the gay and trans panic defenses are? And then we'd love to know about your research.
Yeah, so the trans and gay panic defense it's not a standalone defense, but it's a defense that can be used with I think there's 3 categories: self-defense, provocation, and temporary insanity. So if an individual commits kills somebody who is trans, they can claim that them finding out that that person was trans caused them to have a moment of lapse in judgment, a moment of insanity, essentially. So using the victim's gender identity is basically an excuse to commit that crime. That's how it is interpreted. That's how I interpret it in the court of law.
Do we know how prevalent it is, or how often it is sort of used in recent times?
You know, it's not. It's truly not that often. But there's a great this great professor out of Texas University. He has been cataloging cases since his catalog goes back to, I want to say, 1970, and there's up until last year, I believe, there's about 200 cases just that he has found. So when you look at it in that way, and how often trans people are victims of homicide and violence in general, those are striking numbers. And what tends to happen, you know, sometimes, unfortunately, the person is found not guilty. Other times their charge is reduced because of that other defense that they're using, which is
it's like a mitigating factor, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the first time I heard about it, or the first case that I heard about it, was Matthew Shepard, which obviously was a huge case. And they tried to use that defense, which was total nonsense. Yeah. So it's really dangerous. And I think that the overall message that it sends to society is that violence against trans people is okay, and you can get just a slap on the wrist. And, you know, I think it's really wonderful that a lot of states have banned it, but so many have not. And the ones that have not are the places where these things are happening the most. So
that makes a lot of sense, unfortunately. So what angle did you want to kind of investigate and research when it came time to pick your dissertation topic?
right now I'm looking at attitudes and beliefs of people who mock jurors, basically, who will approve the use of this defense. So I'm interested in looking at people's religious beliefs and political beliefs as it correlates to whether they agree with using this type of defense. So that's going to be measured through a survey, basically, and a vignette of a case. And, you know, the participant doing the study will have to walk through the whole charges and sentencing and go from there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's you could do so much with that. I mean, like you can with every data set, really. But so are you planning on kind of obviously getting this out to as many people as possible, and then weeding out the folks that do not agree this should be a defense that is utilized? Or are you going to be kind of comparing and contrasting the two groups at all? Or do you know? Sometimes we don't know until we get our data set. I know, but kind of what is your idea at this point?
As of right now, I'm going to weed out the other group.
Yeah.
Hone in. Yeah. I just want to focus on the relationship between these two things, if it exists. You know, I have my theories, but yeah, so I'm just going to hone in on those, and it'll go out. I mean, my concern right now is that there will be too many people that know me or have, you know, through social media or whatever, and it may skew the survey results, you know? So, you know, that's something my chair and I are trying to sort out, on how we get this to a broader, more, you know, example of what a mock jury or what a jury in California would actually look like, versus a jury of like my peers, literally.
Yeah, I don't think that's something people think about when we decide who we're going to pick for our sample. When we're looking at conducting research in this way, is how do you not from the get-go influence them, right? I mean, I know we've even talked about like, yes, of course we would share your link when that survey is ready, far and wide, however we can. But then look at like who's that being shared to? It's being shared to people who are already interested in true crime and, you know, behavioral sciences and, you know, the types of folks that listen to our show, which could be, you know, we could certainly have a profile of a certain individual. So yeah, that could be, you know, something that's certainly a concern, which might be something you just have to address as a limitation at the end of it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes that's the best that we can do. So you're just going to be looking at folks in California, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think that's, I mean, it was just the easiest route, I think. And my chair really advised that. And at this point, I'm glad. I just could not imagine trying to do it.
And you listened, which I did not. I did not listen, and I paid the price.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I'm so glad you listened when they asked you to narrow it down. That was very, very smart of you.
Yeah. That was not my plan going into it. I was like, I want to remove the panic defense from across the country. You know,
right.
Larger.
I'm going to change the world. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I'm just going to stay here in this little box for now.
Yeah. Well, and it might be getting, you know, subjects from a sprinkling of different universities throughout the state, because I mean, it's not an incredibly diverse state, but there are still pockets that hold some different values and beliefs around these subjects that, you know, you could definitely tap into that. So wow, very interesting. I mean, are you comfortable sharing your hypothesis at this point, or do you want to kind of hold that for reasons you just...
I'm going to hold. That. Yeah.
Understandable.
I'm going to hold on that. You mentioned the pockets of California, and it's funny because my father and my grandmother live up in Northern California, and so I have to drive through some of those pockets.
There you go.
And I have flyers to advertise this survey whenever it's live. And I thought, well, I'm just going to leave them. I'm just going to stop in all of those weird little pockets and plaster
County. Heck
there they are. Yeah. Auburn, California. Yeah.
Oh yes.
So I remember when I was, one of my dissertation advisors was very helpful in helping me understand. I guess I was so naive at the time when I was getting participants for my surveys, that I was offering sort of an inordinate amount as a potential prize. And it was explained to me like, well, you actually, you know, you have to be careful because when you offer something this big, then the question comes from the IRB, which is the reviewer board, basically, is, are you being coercive by offering something this valuable, which was kind of mind-blowing to me. And it that dovetails perfectly with a listener question from Susan. She says, online surveys are so challenging. Recruitment is like walking a tightrope. Do you have funding to compensate your participants, or is there some sort of exchange?
Right now, there's no funding. I have to submit to the IRB very soon. So I have to make that decision because you can't change it afterwards. And it's looking like it's just going to be a please help me sort of at this point.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're throwing a link or QR code out there, I mean, you could have a good deal of participants.
Yeah.
And now like that makes it so easy these days, you know, when you were, if you have a very tight population that you're just going to, and you can sort of one-on-one or through email interact with each person and say, here's what I'm offering. And like Scott, you know, wanted to give Target gift card, $50 Target gift cards to the whole world. you got to see what
do.
Doable. I mean, thank you. Yes, I'll take one. So we talked a little bit about your consulting, specifically, helping the journalists out. Who, if anyone else, has sort of taken advantage of hearing what you have to say with the education that you have under your belt? Have you been able to consult on any, I guess, real life cases? I mean, they're all real life cases, but something that isn't necessarily working with a journalist.
Yes. Well, it's still working. Well, I still have been working with that particular reporter at the Advocate, but he works really closely with law enforcement on these cases. And I will say that we are working on a case right now that is from the 90s, early 90s in Denver, around Denver, Colorado Springs. And it's an unsolved case of a gay man who was murdered. And we've been working on it for, I want to say, like maybe four months at this point. So it's ongoing. Law enforcement is involved. We've had pretty close contact with everybody. But I can't really.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, obviously you can't say much about that, but I was very curious as to, aside from kind of looking back retrospectively, if there was anything involving law enforcement at this time. How has that experience been for you? I mean, I know it's probably like indirect, like hand in hand with the journalist, but what's it been like?
It's been okay. I feel like, I initially, as a trans person, I have fear of law enforcement for various reasons. And I think that, it's something more internal on my own end of being perceived as a trans person by law enforcement without saying that that's who I am. So otherwise, besides my own psyche, I have had pretty decent experiences. You mentioned my thesis at the start of the show, and I worked with a ton of retired detectives on the cases that I was investigating, and folks who had just worked in LA homicide, and
very cool.
Have remained in touch with them and have only had positive experiences. And I recognize that I am just working with an individual, not necessarily, a person of this huge institution that has its faults. Yeah.
That's great. No, that's and I'm not kidding. Like, I certainly want a copy of that thesis to read it if you don't mind sharing.
Not kidding.
So fun. Oh yeah. It was, it's like, this is my dream to investigate, Elizabeth Short, her case. And, as any true crime person probably is obsessed with.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of shift into something that is much more current and poignant and also horrifying, the next Benedict case, which is infuriating for me on a number of levels. One of the most florid ones is that how little of my non-queer colleagues know anything about it. Like, it just doesn't register for news. It's not a thing that they know anything about. Whereas for me, it's like a punch in the gut, like thinking about that this poor kid had to experience this. And you have had an opportunity to actually go in depth and work with Nex's family. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, absolutely. After I heard about Nex's death, the way that it was being reported initially made it sound like Nex was murdered on campus.
Can you just give our audience an overview, just a reminder of
the
circumstances around Nex's death?
Nex was in a fight in Owasso, Oklahoma, on campus in a bathroom, and he later passed away the next day at a hospital. And the initial reporting of it was that he was murdered in a fight, which, that's super jarring, of course, a 16-year-old trans kid murdered at school. And so this was obviously in my timeline of all my news feeds. And, I really initially thought that this was going to be a 2024 trans panic defense case because of the way that it was being reported on, which, was not the case. as things developed and came out. And you know, the talk of that Nex had committed suicide. I just felt so much heartbreak for him, and his community. And there was something that just told me that I should go out there. And so I went to Owasso. I went to Tulsa and met with different organizations that were doing protests and, you know, at their Capitol halls, city halls, and organizing. And I just talked to people, and I just listened and wanted to know what the culture was like for queer kids out here, how they were doing, you know, a lot of the kids that I talked to didn't know Nex, but they were just as disturbed and upset about the circumstances. And I went into Owasso, which is, I mean, it's just the size of a penny. It's so small. And I got in contact with some of his friends from school. I met with some other mothers who had spoken at a school board meeting, and they gave some really powerful remarks. And they are queer families, and they have queer kids. And I met with them and just listened to them about and learned about their experience in this school district, and how terrible and violent it is to these kids, indirectly and directly. And that this has been an ongoing thing. This is not new type of treatment. This is the climax of their incessant behavior towards kids like this, towards kids like Nex. And I tried to make contact with the Benedicts at that time. I left flowers and a card at their address, and I went to Nex's grave. But I knew that, you know, there was so much going on. I wasn't trying to invade their space or, you know, be a reporter that shows up on this. I wasn't a reporter, you know, I'm not a reporter. And I ended up getting in contact with the family's private investigator. He actually got my contact information from someone that I spoke to out there. And he wanted to talk to me and just sort of get my contacts of families that I had spoken with, exchange information. And that's how I learned that the family was sort of building a case against the school district, which is still ongoing right now. And after that, my name got put into the family's peripheral. And, you know, I made contact with Nex's sister, and she sort of eased me into talking to Nex's grandmother, his adopted mother, Sue. And I told them that, you know, I had written a couple articles for the Los Angeles Blade that I was sharing with them. And they were just really upset with how poor the reporting was on the case from the jump, from the start, you know, and how large the case has turned into. This is a small town in the middle of nowhere. You know, these folks do not, it's traumatizing already that they've lost their kid, on top of the attention now that they're getting from the media, the scrutiny that they're getting from the queer community because Sue slips and misgenders Nex. You know, there's no, it's just, all of it was just so much for them. And which makes me feel even more grateful that they spoke to me at all. And
so in that experience, can you give us a little bit more of a picture of who Nex was beyond just the headlines and this awful event? I mean, from the way you describe it, you know, I'm from a much older generation. I grew up in Northern Alabama. My coming out was not as challenging as many of my colleagues. I don't know how that happened to be. Maybe it was just the particular city I was in, but the way you describe this city in Oklahoma being so tiny, it just seems to give us a picture of Nex being in a position of, I am going to be who I am, regardless of what the challenges are. I'm going to be true to myself, which is quite heroic, but had a not so good, a terrible ending. Can you give us more about that?
Yeah. I mean, you described it really perfectly. He really was so resilient. The bullying that was taking place on campus was relentless, and this wasn't a one-off incident. Maybe with the kids that were involved, but this was something that Nex and his friends all experienced. He was, by all accounts, a totally normal 16-year-old, kind of weird gothy kid, and had really quirky interests, and he was a great artist. I learned about what music he liked, and he was a big animal lover, and he had plans. He had a plan for his life to join the military and to be a canine trainer. He had talked to recruiters already. He had, and his sister and I talked about this because I was taken back by such a strong interest in the military as a queer and trans person, especially for a younger generation. And she made a great point of like, it gets you out. It gets you out of these small communities.
Yeah.
And it just also kind of spoke to more of Nex's resilience, because there could be a very large chunk of his life where he would have to, kind of withhold himself to be safe in the world, in that military environment. But that was a sacrifice, it sounds like he was willing to make so that he could move on to bigger and better things. He had a great group of friends. They all still continue to go over and see Sue and the family. And, I just feel so much empathy for all of them. I had one of my closest friends committed suicide when we were 12, and you can just never fathom a child deciding to do something like that.
Yeah.
They've already lived so much to be able to make that decision,
Yeah.
Very true statement. Yeah. The first friend I lost was to suicide in high school as well. And talk about trying to just wrap your head around death as a child yourself, but
absolutely.
a complicated of death and grief is, but well put. They've lived so much already, obviously. So aside from obviously the you said the lawsuit is still unfolding and pending, how is the family in terms of what else do they kind of foresee doing with all of this? Not that they have to, let me be clear with that. And I know at different times it can come up where families feel like, okay, this is my path now, or this is what we're carving, or this is something that we're going to be advocates for. Are they at any point kind of choosing to do that yet that you know of?
Yeah, I remember Sue had mentioned that they had a GoFundMe, and a large portion of that money was going to the Trevor Project, which is a suicide hotline for queer and trans kids, and they are maybe going to do some sort of foundation in Nex's name. I can't quite remember the specifics of it. It could already be in the works, I'm not sure, but I do think that they are going to pursue something in anti-bully behavior. Yeah,
I can imagine they need to channel all these feelings somewhere.
They, his room is still as it was. It's only been 6 months. It feels so long ago.
Oh my gosh, it's only been 6 months.
It's only been 6 months.
Wow.
So, they're all they have such great spirits. Anytime I talk to them, they really channel such joy, and talking about Nex you know, I can hear them smiling over the phone. And that's what I wanted to know about him, you know. And I don't know if it was for any particular reason. I just felt like this kid is so much more than all of the trans people who are on the news for 50 seconds are so much more than these stories, you know, and we never get that. We never get those little details that really make somebody a human.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's what they're doing moving forward with this. You are in the midst of writing a couple of books right now.
Yes.
2 at the same time, TJ? I kind of think you're just a glutton for punishment and overloading yourself on purpose.
And we're a terrible influence.
And we are the pot calling the kettle black right now.
Yeah.
But tell us about those.
One of the books I started a long time ago. It's been an ongoing process. I don't know why. It's the first book I've ever written. And, but finishing and working on them at the same time has been very confusing because they're so different. The first book is based in Los Angeles in the 1940s, surprise, surprise. And it's through the perspective of a trans character who is loosely based on me. And he, you know, becomes friends with Elizabeth Short out of nowhere and helps solve her murder and goes through this sort of really spirally story of just like a chaotic life as a trans person in 1940s LA, who's also now a detective, you know.
Right.
What a great allegory. I love this. I love it.
It's been so fun to write because I'm such a history buff that I want every single detail as accurate as possible. So I'm just digging through newspapers.com. I'm in the library archives, you know. Will it ever get published? Who knows? But it's been very fun.
Please tell us that crazy criminal psychiatrist J. Paul DeRiver makes an appearance because he would be all over this. Oh my gosh.
He absolutely does. And then the other one is I guess about Nex in a way. It's you know, it's about my experience learning about Nex and the investigation. I really pick apart what I learned through the media on how they reported. If it bleeds, it leads comes up a lot. And what my experience was like going to Owasso, this really small town, as a trans person, and meeting with other families. And you know, I don't think that there's a you know, a nice tiny bow at the end of this particular book, but I guess the goal is to really look at a system that has so much power and can impact queer youth so dangerously, you know, and it's the school system and it's the government. Yeah.
Well,
It's
I mean, there's
fascinating to me also, just sort of at this moment in time where this tragedy occurred is where people in the queer community, in the queer spectrum, have an ability, the younger people, to feel that they're not alone. You can be in the middle of nowhere, but if you're online, you can find community. You can find out that what you're experiencing, you know, is just a unique part of you rather than something that is to be ashamed of, which is just so different from previous generations. And yet the other side of it is that there's just as much hate spewed online and bringing people together that pours gasoline on that fire of this type of hate and violence that allows it to continue to grow. It's just such a mixed bag, and I'm glad that there are people that are driven like yourself that are in the mix of this and helping people sort through all of this, especially like you said, that if it bleeds, it leads. The way that was presented, that first 3 days of just completely misrepresenting what happened, that can't ever be undone. Once that's been unleashed, there are people that will never know or understand the true sequence of events, no matter how much is written about it. But if anyone's going to convince them, I think that your work will. So the family and Nex are very lucky to have you in their corner.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a book that could highlight so many different relevant issues and just how we consume media and what we should be cautious about. And going back to what both of you were saying about those first initial hours and days of the information we were getting, you know, I'm a big proponent of kind of waiting and hearing for more details to come out, because I know what small snapshots we get. And I feel that sometimes when I say that, it's a little misunderstood by people who are very passionate about things, right? Because sometimes, and of course, speaking from somebody who is in law enforcement and, you know, of course, has that piece of me, oftentimes, and very unfortunately, it's with police violence videos, right? Where we get a very quick little snapshot. And I know there's more. I don't know that necessarily the outcome's going to be different with more information, but I know there's more information. And I think, you know, sometimes the pendulum swings really far where people are like, why do we have to wait for more info to come out? Like, it is what it is. I saw it with my own eyes, or what have you, or I'm hearing it from, you know, a news reporter. And this is an example, Nexus story, of how we can assume something, and rightfully so. I mean, we assumed the worst and the tragedy of it because it's like, yeah, this was bound to happen yet again. And, you know, it can change so rapidly. And then you have kind of the other layers of like, is this suicide? Is this not? Is this, you know, anyway, it would be super interesting to explore. But I think the story is also reminiscent of the stories Scott and I just covered in our bullying episode. Those weren't queer kids, but the story's the same. You know, the parents having to report this a gajillion times.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
That's something that needs attention in and of itself, and where the schools are taking action and what those fine lines are, because I know there are fine lines and there's schools that do very good jobs at it, but are they picking and choosing these days who they take seriously?
Yeah.
Are you taking notes so you can change your book now? No, I'm just kidding.
I am, definitely. Yeah, that'd be a great chat.
It's a lot. Well, where can people find you? Your writings? What's a good way? Just your website?
My website is great. I also have a Substack now, where I just published a piece about Nex the other day. It's called Personally Curious, and that's probably the best place right now. Yeah.
Okay, I'm putting those in the chat.
Yeah, my Instagram too. I post stuff on there. I never remember my handle.
That's okay. I got it up on the screen right now.
So. Like, what is it? It's TJ. I know that.
It's just hard to say TJ in the all different ways that it's up there, but that's okay. We got a visual for folks.
Perfect.
We're so excited to hear what's next for you. So please keep us posted. Don't be a stranger. We're all in Los Angeles, so we need to, in real life, see each other one day soon.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Yes.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah, of course. We appreciate your time and doing this and taking some time away from your wife and the fam out in Boston. So, yeah, good luck with everything, and reach out if you need anything. You know, as people who have been there, done that, and know what you're going through, we're happy to be a support. So,
thank you so much.
You're welcome. Everyone else, thanks so much for spending an hour with us on Saturday, and we'll probably have another Behind the Couch in October for you guys. So stay tuned to our social media for that. Bye, guys. Happy Saturday.
Bye-bye.